So like you, I'm one of the Movember ambassadors, and I've done Movember for 10 years now in memory of my dad, who died of cancer. He was a farmer and not the type of guy that would do your annual health check. And for me, it's really important to keep his memory alive and to also try and make sure other people don't go through what my family did. And then I'm also a doctor here at St. Vincent's. I'm one of the endocrinology registrars, and our doctors have really high rates of mental health problems as well. And that's not really discussed very much. Often I think with Movember, we say, you know, men are bottled up and women are really good at expressing, but I think it's much more complex than that. And there's a culture in medicine of really keeping things inside. So I think that's now, you know, a big part of my Movember is, you know, mental health in doctors as well. Hugo, you've had cancer not once, but twice before the age of 25. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like as a young, healthy guy having cancer, and, you know, also how that affected you mentally, and, you know, how your relationships with people and how you know, got through that?
Yeah, look, it's been challenging for sure, but I think I have learned a lot over the years. And initially, when I got diagnosed with testicular cancer at 21, I was that classic naive bloke who put off the initial little lump on my testicle and put it off for over 6 months or so. And it wasn't until I finally went to the doctor that it had time to spread. And what would have been a more sort of routine...
Just a surgery maybe?
Surgery to remove the testicle, ended up having follow-on chemo and major operations and removing all lymph nodes and everything like that. So that was difficult, but I did learn the hard way the importance of early detection. And then sort of, that was my next few years of young, the early 20s. My army career was sort of put on hold. They've been incredibly supportive. And then fast track sort of 5 years or so, I got the 5-year all clear for the testicular cancer, which was fantastic. You know, I remember the day very, very well. Got promoted to captain, lined up for a deployment, life's looking pretty good. But then my bowels started playing up unexpectedly, prompted me to go off to a doctor, had a bit of a colonoscopy. So fortunately, I did detect it early, my bowel cancer. So when my bowels started playing up, I kind of waited maybe 2 or 3 weeks and thought, nope, something's not quite right. I'm going to go off to my doctor. So complete opposite of what I did with the testicular cancer. I was at least proactive with my health. Went off to the doctor, had the colonoscopy, and then unfortunately they found a couple of nasty polyps, which was bowel cancer. And then I had to have some pretty major operations. Removed a big chunk of bowel, went on some immunosuppressants, biologic drugs, tried all sorts of things. But ultimately they then had to remove my entire large bowel, colon and rectum, and then created an amazing thing that you doctors can do in medicine, but created like an internal J pouch from my small bowel, which is how I more or less function. We'll go to the bathroom. That being said, my health still was going through some difficult times. I'm having the conversations now with my amazing doctors at St. Vincent's about looking at having a permanent stoma, which will probably improve my quality of life.
Can you tell us a bit about the mental health implications of what you've been through and those really low points?
Yeah, look, I think it's something that's often not spoken about as much as like when someone's going through something like cancer, you do everything you can to get rid of the cancer, treatments, doctor's appointments, surgeries, chemo, whatever. But then the mental health side of things often doesn't get spoken about, and it's often pushed to the side. And I got very good at pushing it to the side and putting on that mask and pretending that, you know, I was cruising through and, you know, I was extremely positive and optimistic all the time, which in fact wasn't always the case. But I think as well I kept it so hidden because I felt like I was really causing Amber, my partner, and my family so much pain in what I was going through. Because as you know, cancer impacts everyone. It doesn't just impact you, it impacts family, friends, colleagues, communities. So I felt like if I was then to burden them with my mental health challenges too, it was just something else.
I think people like you and I who are so open about talking about our mental health, we forget that there's still a lot of stigma and shame with, you know, not coping, which I just think is so ridiculous because we're all going to have periods in our lives where we're not coping physically or mentally, and it's more about accepting that's going to happen and getting the support we need. So, and also then the other reason why I'm passionate is since becoming a doctor, I've had, you know, mental health struggles, and that's really common in medicine, but we don't talk about it enough. I think cultures are changing, and St Vincent's do great work. There's counsellors available for junior doctors, and cultures really are changing, but I think we still do have a way to go. So yeah, lots of different reasons, and the journey is probably still changing and growing as I do too. But yeah, I'm really excited to keep being with Movember as they change as an organisation and do more work too.
So Movember's concept of growing mows like this CD mow today, it's that walking billboard and generating conversations, and important conversations. And one of those important conversations is about guys seeking help and guys going after their doctor and looking out for those warning signs. Why do you think typically guys aren't good at reaching out for help, whether it be mental health support or even for their physical health, if something's not quite right, going after the doctor? Why do you think men aren't great at that?
I can remember once in my Movember campaign, I had this eureka moment that I realised the cultures that are being bad for men's mental health, which is the not wanting to show vulnerability, not wanting to be able to have to rely on others, or even physical problems being seen as a weakness, are the exact same attitudes and cultures that are bad for men's physical health. They don't even want to rely on a doctor who's a medical expert to help them with a problem, and even a physical problem is seen as weakness or vulnerability. And they're really the cultures, and this she'll be right attitude as well, which is what we do for mental health. So they're really actually the same problems that are having negative impacts on people's health, and especially men's health, which is such a shame, because things like cancer, testicular cancer, things like bowel cancer, if they're caught early, they're curable. And my dad is the classic example. He had what's called lymphoma, which if it's found early, which he did have some early signs, it often is curable. But he said she'll be right and left it. And by the time he got a diagnosis, it had spread all through his body. And that's why it is so important to have things checked early. And heartbreakingly, I've lost count of how many patients I've had who have said, and I was an oncology registrar and palliative care registrar in the past, God, I was an idiot. If only I could go back in time when, I had some bleeding from the bowels or I'd lost weight. And there's nothing, there's so many things we can do in work, in life, but we just can't go back in time and change that. So that's why, so important. You're not causing hassle. Sometimes I think patients feel like, oh, it's not too bad. I don't want to put anyone out. We're here to be put out. That's our roles as doctors. And 99% of the time, it will be nothing. But it's all about that 1% of the time when it is something. And why, yeah, it's so important to get things checked out early.
And then for the mental health side, we know the statistics is, it's approaching almost 9 people every day on average in Australia end their own life. And 7 of those are men.
I think about this as well with the increased rates of suicide amongst doctors. And I think sometimes you feel, maybe it's this feeling like I'm not coping, but I can't admit I'm not coping. And so that's seen as, the best solution, which of course it is not, and that's heartbreaking. But I think, generally there is more of a culture with men of, self-reliance and not wanting to show vulnerability or weakness. And they're all so linked. So, but yeah, it's a complex question with lots of deep cultural issues that aren't going to be fixed. It's not going to be a new antidepressant. It's not going to be a different kind of program. These are complex cultural issues that we need to address. What's the underlying cause, as well as all of the healthcare for people in crisis. But it would be great if we could prevent people getting to that crisis point initially. It's almost, you can't be what you can't see. If men haven't had role models that have shown them it's okay to be vulnerable and how to express their emotions, because that's a learned skill almost. And we've talked about this, it's from actually learning about how am I feeling right now. And they will learn skills. It's not necessarily innate. So also education is a big part, and having leaders and, sports people and people like you, really demonstrating that these things are okay, and they're actually not just okay, they're really good things.
100%. And recently I shared my story in a very male-dominant environment at a construction site. I'm wearing the hard hat, the vest, and the guys, in the audience, 99% males, are those blokey blokes that you can picture. I shared my story. I was pretty vulnerable. I took a little bit emotional whilst I was sharing my story. At the end of the presentation, this blokey bloke came up to me and he had some tears in his eyes, and he shared something that he was going through. So it's kind of that whole concept of hopefully seeing other men in your life, other people being vulnerable and sharing their feelings and talking about what they're going through. It can encourage others to do it. So being Movember 2022 Movember campaign, the proud ambassador that you are, what's one key, got the little mo and everything, repping the mo, I love it. What's one key takeaway or message this campaign that you would like to put out there?
I really think it's so important to know if we're improving the mental health, the well-being, the communication skills, the ability for men to express how they're feeling, that is going to benefit all the women in their life as well. And mental health and supporting someone with mental health can be really hard and challenging, and we're not all mental health experts, and at times it can be hard. And I think that's important to know that supporting someone with mental health can be tough, but there's some really good resources available. I have personally used the Movember Conversations kind of like online app, which gives you really good advice on how to bring things up or how to answer things in a way that is really supportive of good communication. So yeah, maybe my message is Movember's great for women to get involved in. They're doing so much great work and kind of funding really amazing initiatives. And yeah, using the Movember Conversations app if you've got a man in your life that is going through a hard time.
There are so many great messages that Movember stand for, and this time of the year it's fantastic. But I think a key one for me is all about connecting with someone in your life and having that person in your life that you can reach out to when you're struggling, but also be there for when they're struggling. And even if you just have that one person in your life, and when you're going through a difficult time, let's face it, we will all go through difficult times in our life, knowing that you can go to them for support, and that vice versa, you can be there for when they might be struggling. And if you've got 2 or 3 of those people, fantastic, but at least one. And then use this month as a bit of an excuse to go, you know what, I haven't actually reached out to that person, or I haven't reached out to an old mate in a while. Just even sending them a simple little text message, or picking the phone up, give them a call, or arrange that long overdue catch up. I think if we just simplify it, and it's all about connection, right? And just simplify the whole concept of you don't have to worry alone. I think that'll go a long way.
I love that. And it's interesting, I think we worry so much about burdening people with our problems. But for me, I think if I had a friend that was struggling, would I want them to come to me? And the answer would be yes. So I'm sure that is returned. So if you've got a friend that you would support, you should feel like you should be able to reach out to them as well. Yeah?
Definitely.
Yeah.